Welcome back to the third and final episode of this Trilogy series. This is Intuitive Wellness, Exploring the Biofield Within. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Greenwell, and it's been such an honor to take you on this journey into the subtle energy of the body and the wisdom that it holds. And today's episode is titled Spiritual Healing, a Soul Approach to Illness and Healing. And it's a powerful one, because we're not often looking at the spiritual aspects of an illness. We're often looking at the physical ailments, the signs that come from the body, and we don't often even know how to read the spiritual aspect. So today we're joined once again by Dr. Delphine Rossi, a leader in the field of integrative and complementary health. She works in higher education for spiritual wellness and holistic healing. Welcome back, Delphine.
Thank you, Michelle.
Delphine has spent decades weaving her experience across mental health, hospice care, medical settings, and spiritual counseling. She's a licensed ordained minister. She's pioneered degree programs and curriculum in integrative health, and her published research has spanned spiritual healing, children's well-being, and the soul's role in personal transformation. She served as director of hospice, a hospital chaplain volunteer, and a spiritual counselor, always bringing compassion and clarity to the soul's journey through health and healing. Before we begin, you know that we need to have a cup of tea in our hand. And so if you haven't made anything to listen to this podcast, now's the time to put the kettle on. And I'm going to ask you, Delphine, what have you put in your cup today?
Today, I have fireside vanilla spice. And I'm going to read the ingredients: cinnamon, ginger, licorice, cardamom, and natural vanilla.
Oh my gosh. And you know, vanilla is so powerful in the spiritual realm, actually, in a lot of things that people do. They don't realize that vanilla is what you put in the cookies, but it is very powerful. Beautiful. That's like, feels like a warm hug, that particular blend.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is.
Now, you said it had ginger in it, which is going to match
Yes.
what I chose for mine today. So this is great. So from the Cape Breton Tea Company, I'm going to feature the Golden Serenity Tea. This is a tea that we created for part of the Unwinding Trauma series to help build resiliency. And it's at the start of the chakras. So it's at the root chakra. And the two ingredients I'm going to highlight today include ginger, and the other one is the bale nut. But let's first go to the affirmation that's on the package. And when you're sipping on these teas, this gives you the opportunity to think about where you want to go, what your goal might be, what your outcome might look like. And as you're thinking of listening to the podcast today and spiritual healing and your soul's approach to health and wellness, then this is an opportunity to think about, what is that going to look like for you on the other side of this conversation, and where might your journey take you? So the intention is soften the desire to push through. With confidence and an authentic self-love, welcome peace within. And so often we do just try to keep pushing the envelope, pushing the button. If I could only get this done, if I'd only done more, and we're always pushing that piece. What happens when we stop and we just breathe? And we say, we are there. We have arrived. All right, so let's look at ginger. So ginger actually acknowledges our pain. So on a soul's level, it has the opportunity for us to be recognized that pain is there, but then it infuses us with a new determination, a new will to allow us to let go and let the healing process begin. And a lot of people go to ginger and honey. They have a sore throat or not quite feeling 100%. That's where they'll often go. And when I'm making my switchel, I'll put ginger in there as well. So just to realize the ginger is listening, it's there for you, and then it's going to infuse the opportunity for you to relax and let go. And then I'm going to pair that with the bale nut today, which is a fruit. It is about mental peace. It's the opportunity to enhance your spiritual awareness and then bring about that calmness in your mind that you don't have to be thinking about the next piece. Sit in it, be present with it. So, as you've got your heartwarming mug there, Delphine, I'm going to just lift up my golden serenity. Cheers. Thank you so much for joining.
Cheers. Thank you.
If you have not tuned in before, you'll see us sipping on the tea as we go along, and that's energetically continuing to bring those herbs in and help us move this conversation along and help give you a healing session as you listen. So, let's move from there and dive into our soul's purpose, looking at the perspective of healing through the soul. Delphine, can you tell me a little bit about what is spiritual healing?
Yes, Michelle. First, I want to just review the definitions here because that way the viewers know what we're talking about. Soul or psyche is the more life-oriented and less transcendent aspect of the self. That's the definition we're going to be using. Intimately connected with the emotions in the heart. Healing is about finding inner peace with one's life. And I'm going to expand on that in just a minute. But curing is restoring the physiology to a previously functional state. So there's quite a difference between healing and curing, but people often use those terms interchangeably. So anyway, those are the terms, that's how we're going to be looking at spiritual healing today. So spiritual healing is an acceptance of an appreciation for life just as it is and just as it has been. And so it's finding meaning and purpose to life events. And it's also about seeing life experiences without judgment. In other words, meeting life with awareness and seeing experiences as spiritual experiences meant for good, meant for transformation. Spiritual healing is also about compassion and forgiveness with the self, but also with others.
And so often people, in an experience, they'll try to solve why they had that experience. Their mental process comes in and fills in blanks that they have.
Yes.
And that pulls them away then from the spiritual aspect of it.
Yes, because many people want to know why, right? The why. Why has this happened to me? Why is this occurring? And so they go on this search for the why. But it's really more of a spiritual search because it's about the finding or assigning that meaning, that unique personal meaning to that life experience and appreciating the experience. In other words, feeling gratitude that one had that life experience. And that can be a challenge.
Mm. Especially if it's an experience that you didn't want, that wasn't on your radar.
Yes.
Or as you were thinking about your goal, that was not in the equation at all, that experience needed to happen in order for you to get to your goal. So
Yes, and that
go
that
ahead.
has to do, I believe, more with um, that underlying faith and trust in the universe. Because when one has that underlying faith and trust in the universe, then it's not as challenging to try to assign meaning and figure out the why.
And if you're trying to solve the why, you could be missing the whole reason for the experience. The blinders can go on, and
Sure.
the why is creating a block. So that letting go piece of Ginger, of letting go so the healing process can happen, is letting go of that need to have the why.
That too, yes, because sometimes We just don't know, right? And it may be that we have an insight, several months after, or some years after, or even decades after, or sometimes not at all, but just to accept and appreciate, well, that happened, and I appreciate it. I've learned from it, or I've grown from it, I've transformed. Yes. I want to mention that the Persian mystic Rumi has a saying, where there is ruin, there is a chance to find treasure. And I really like that saying very much. When I first read it a couple decades ago, I had to really think about it, but it is really, to me, it's really very accurate, very true in a spiritual sense.
And so if you're trying to solve the why, you can't see a treasure. It'll get lost in the why. Yeah, interesting. I'm just saying that for people because I just know so often, especially when people don't feel good, how they solve the problem. Well, my
Mhm.
back is sore because, and then they fill in the blank. They actually don't even know if it's true, but they'll fill it in that way.
Mhm.
But then if you step back and go, okay, what in my life is not where I want it to be? What does my back represent? And what does that mean to the way I'm living? And where's that nugget inside of that way of knowing?
Yes, and we haven't really educated humanity, at least in the Western world, to think that way. But now we are. I mean, in other words, in the past we haven't, but now with a more holistic approach to health and wellness, uh, we're beginning to help people think out of that box of just the physicality and into having spiritual eyes to see what's going on.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Okay, so if we're looking at emotional energy and intuition, as we did in the previous episodes, how do our
Mhm.
beliefs and assumptions, especially the ones around illness, so this is, we just started talking about this, how did they shape
Mhm.
our experience of health and healing?
Well, beliefs and assumptions really influence like how illness may be seen or understood. And so, for example, illness is considered like a sense of unease, not feeling well, uncomfortable, etc. Just illness in general. Um, and in the Western view, traditionally, over, let's say, the past decades, we've addressed illness like as coming from largely unhealthy lifestyle behaviors, right? Cigarette smoking, excessive alcohol consumption, substance abuse, poor nutritional habits. Um, and of course, prior to that, it was more the disease model in that, we had bacterias, viruses, etc., right, that were really causing causing illness and disease, like pathogens, toxins that we didn't have the pharmaceuticals for at that point. Um, and then there are, through cultures and through history, there are different ways that people have viewed illness that is part of their beliefs or their assumptions. For example, some cultures believe that illness could be karma related. And some people, I mean, even, in this current holistic viewpoint, they may think that it's some kind of karmic issue going on. Some cultures through time have believed that illness was a punishment for sin by God, or they also believe that it's God's will. Um, and then there's the psychological viewpoint that illness is caused by repressed emotions and trauma, or illness is a lesson. That's sort of a new age kind of thought. Or there's something out of sync in the holistic, mind, body, and spirit. Or in some belief systems, illness is part of like a divine plan or a divine order. So, and there are many more beliefs as well. But in other words, all these beliefs and assumptions, depending on what a person really does believe about their illness, is going to lead them to how they handle that illness and disease, and how and where they seek treatment for it.
Interesting.
And so it's very much interrelated. The beliefs and assumptions are very much interrelated to how an individual may go out and actually pursue some form of treatment. But of course, in the Western world, we see that in general, people may go to a physician because something is amiss, but they rarely take a look at what may be behind that, like the emotions and the spiritual issues that are co-creating it, so to speak. And that's where our attention in this large field of bioenergetic wellness and healing is being focused to help people learn how to really be in touch with their bodies and their mind and their spirit, so that they can figure this out and create the right treatment plan for themselves. Like, in other words, where they go for treatment. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, you get that diagnosis. Oh, it's today in class it's bursitis. And my hips are feeling wonderful. My bursitis is like hardly even there. And then the question is it bursitis? And then the answer today was, well, of course it is. So there was that was the lens. But what is the answer if you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, and you're looking at what is the power of the hip, your source of energy? How are you living with vitality? How are you moving through your day? Then you can look at the impetus of how did that pain arrive, that then it looks like bursitis. I'm just trying to give a description for people, because again, that was that solving today was, oh, I have this, so I feel like this, and it's alleviated by what we've just been participating in, but it'll be back, right? And they're just ready for the next piece. But what you're saying is, if you're looking at beliefs and assumptions, there's lots of ways of looking at it. What if you did change your lens and looked at it from another angle? What if you opened up that
absolutely.
conversation? Yeah.
Absolutely. Because some of the ways that people may look at their illness could be very devastating for them, right? Like if it's a punishment or you've done something wrong, so to speak, retribution. And if you changed your lens and you looked at it as something like, okay, my body is talking to me, it's trying to tell me something about my inner and outer life, what might that be? That's much more positive.
Yeah, instead of I deserve this, and then you just build yourself into a deeper hole. I deserve this, I deserve this, I deserve this, and you stay there, and you can never get back out of it. And then living your life disappears, because then it's just trying to survive, which is completely different. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Now, you introduced the idea of woundology in our conversations. Could you explain what this is, and then the secondary gains of illness, how they show up in the healing journey?
Sure. Woundology is the manipulative value that people get from using wounds as a source of power and control, usually over others, in their life. And so Woundology also creates sympathy for the person who wants to be perceived as a victim, so to speak. And so woundology is centered around gaining attention to the wounds. And often this poor me or victim stance that people like to take because they feel that they can manipulate others and get a lot of power and control by using their wounds. And so I'll give an example because examples are good. And these are personal examples that I've had, like with meeting other people. So, for example, like if you meet someone and within the first 5 minutes, like you've never met them before, and in the first 5 minutes, they start to relate a wound to you. In other words, well, my husband passed away or my wife passed away and this, but then you find out that the spouse passed away 18 years ago. Or you meet someone and within the first 5 minutes, you hadn't known them before, they let you know that their father left the family when they were a child, but this person is in their 50s or their 40s. So you see, those are like red flags or clues that someone is using woundology to gain sympathy, to gain perhaps some kind of power and control over, how you perceive them or where the conversation is going to go, etc. So secondary gains of illness. Dr. O. Carl Simonton, who is now deceased, was a real pioneer in this field. He was an oncologist, and he and as well as others in this whole big field of healing really took a look at what was going on when patients used their illness as a sense of currency, in other words, as a sense of woundology. And what he found, or what they found, as far as advantages, were getting attention, care, and nurturing from others that ordinarily they might not receive. So again, this idea of they're getting a lot of attention, not having to meet one's own or others' higher standards for themselves. Also, being able to control others by using their wounds as power. And again, asserting that victim stance. So those are several ways in which they found that people used wounds as for secondary gain. However, there are a few ways that people may use illness in a positive way, in a secondary gain, and that would be an opportunity and a space to really reflect on one's life and regroup one's psychological energy to deal with whatever problems that they're facing in their life that they recognize are contributing to their illness. And then to gain some kind of incentive for personal growth. So while there are some more negative aspects of the secondary gains of illness that people can undertake, there are several factors that can really serve a significant purpose to their own growth and healing from an illness.
So they really, there's a fine line between, because some people, it's a subconscious piece that this woundology sets up. Some it's a conscious, but for most it's probably subconscious. And so this, the ability to stop and realize that it's even sitting there, and the words that they might use, or how they convey how they're feeling in the day. And I like how, in the first 5 minutes, what do they tell you? So from the person might be exhibiting that woundology, but not realizing it, listening to yourself say it to other people, and
Mhm.
and realizing, oh, I do tell everyone that I'm in pain, or that my father left me, or whatever it
Mhm.
happens to be. Um,
Yes.
and that story is a story I continue to tell every day. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a fine line. And then you have the judgment piece of it, is you have a choice of whether you choose to judge yourself and berate yourself as a result of that,
Mhm.
or like you said, pull yourself into that space of I'm going to be wizened by it, and I'm going to move forward from it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think a lot of that, as you're saying, has to do with that self-awareness. And there are some people who, you know, people that that you may, see, several times a week, and it's always something about, oh, this aches or that aches, or they're always coming out with, something that isn't right. And I think some of that is because they want to be heard, because they're feeling in their life that they don't have someone who's really hearing them. So I think that could be another piece in that as well. Sort of the another psycho spiritual piece, so to say.
So then that lends to, if people are listening, recognizing this within themselves, to then think about, in what way would you like people to hear you? Do you
Hmm.
want them to hear you because of your aches and complaints, or do you want them to hear you because you're interesting? You read good books, you've been
Hmm.
watching interesting shows, you have a craft that you love to do. Would you rather that they heard you from that perspective, or would you want to keep telling the story of your wound? Yeah.
Hmm. Yes.
Wow. It does, this does really approach really sitting back and almost being the fly on the wall in how you interact with people in a group setting, how you interact with some of your closest friends, who do you confide in, and who do you not confide in, and who listens to you. And then you've got that empathy piece, who empathizes with you and then allows you to continue with that power, and who's compassionate with you and says, hey, get it together. I've heard you say this for the last 5 weeks, either fix it or, move on already. And those are the people sometimes that we push away because we didn't want that answer. We wanted them to say, oh, I'm so sorry that you feel so bad. And I really wish I could do something for you. And here, let me carry your groceries, and then it's like, oh, thank you. And then it's like, now I've been served. But to sit back and really look at, what does the scene look like? If I was the fly on the wall, is that who I really want to be?
Yes. Yes. And uh, there are certainly people that really don't want to hear uh, that. Oh, come on, you've you can deal with this, you can get over it, etc. Because that is their. I mean, they really don't know any other way. That they really feel that they're a victim, and that is how they live their life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know for me, I have a couple people where I can handle some of it for a ways, but if they haven't made a change, then I usually have to push them a little bit further out. And I'm
Mhm.
still there, but I limit how often we interact, or when I start to hear the no, as a suggestion comes out, perhaps you'd like to look at it this way. No. Then you go, okay, you're not ready to move, so I'll wait
Mhm.
until you're ready to move.
Yes.
And so I'll just have to step back until that point. Um, and again, those are all signals that if you sit back and become the fly on the wall, you might recognize those signals, the way that you interact, the way that other people interact with you. And then, who are the true friends? Who are the ones
Mhm.
that continue to be there? And how often have they said, yes, I hear you? And then they hear you again. But then they
Mhm.
make a suggestion. And how often have you listened to the suggestion? What have you done with it?
Yes. Very true.
Wow. This is such a deep conversation because illness, we just want to put it in a box. We want to have a label on it. We want to have a pill that fixes it. And we don't want a
Mhm.
deep dive necessarily.
True. Yes, I think that, that's how many people in the Western world have grown up, through decades. That, if there's something wrong, you go to a doctor and the doctor fixes it. But it's like a purely physiological thing. But there's really so much more that's going on. And again, in our field, we can help people to identify that. And even now in like integrative and functional medicine, doctors are much more open in those specific areas of Western medicine to looking at what is going on emotionally with this patient. And even in oncology, the field of psycho-oncology has been going on for decades now, right? Looking at what is the psychology going on with people who develop cancer. So, and as well as like heart disease and etc. So there is that. It's not necessarily so much yet in the complete mainstream, but it is there, and that's a good thing.
And it is a good thing. There's lots of titles that go with that because the titles have gotten longer, like you said, the psycho-oncology, right? So people who specialize in that. The sad part is if you're getting to those people, you've been sitting with that dis-ease for a long time. And so it's the opportunity of what we're doing in the field of health and wellness, of identifying well ahead of those illnesses reaching that point where you have to be sitting across from an oncologist and
Mhm.
facing, what kind of choices do you have, which can be life and death choices.
Yes.
Um, so it's stepping back to that and coming back to, I have a pain in my big toe. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at
Mhm.
it now instead of it's gone up the leg and it's now the whole leg instead of just the big toe, um,
Yeah.
and really being present with it.
Yeah. So illness is always also thought of in this whole realm of woundology and secondary gains as a suppressed aliveness, as well as like in shamanic thought, illness is attributed to soul loss. So if we take a wider view, we see that this these larger perspectives are out there. People just need to look for them if um, if they're wanting a deeper dive into what's going on with an illness.
Mm.
And what's interesting, Hippocrates had said, it is more important to know what sort of patient has a disease rather than what sort of disease a patient has. This is what, centuries ago, right?
Mm.
So some of this is really nothing new, as far as what man understood, as far as the mind, body, and spirit all working together. So, and I like that saying, right? Because in much of Western medicine, we don't see the patient as being treated as a holistic individual. We see them more as that everybody receives a certain standard of care, so to speak. And that standard of care is standard amongst everybody. In other words, it's, I think that more physicians are becoming, in particular in integrative and functional medicine, becoming more aware of the uniqueness and individuality. But in some of the more specialized medical professions, it's still that standard of care. There isn't that real individual uniqueness that is really looked upon, like, like what kind of patient has this disease? right, versus the disease the patient has.
And wouldn't it be
Yeah.
something if instead of putting all the eggs in the basket of waiting for that appointment to get to see the specialist, we went, that's the physical part that I'm going to take care of. But now let me go work
Mhm.
on the spiritual aspect of what's going on for me. And now let me look at the emotional aspects. And we talk about body, mind, and spirit, but we don't go body, mind, and
Yes.
spirit. When we're looking for the healing aspect, we go over to the physical structure and then we stay there. And we
Mhm.
hand over everything to somebody else. And they're not looking for that. So
No.
that's our
No.
job to be looking for that and to
Mhm.
find that space where we can find those answers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
All right. In your research and your work with clients, how often do you find illness as a metaphor?
Ah, well, often, very often, because our body is very conscious, it's extremely intelligent, and it's always talking to us, as we spoke about on the first session that we did. How the biofield is always giving us information. And so illness can be seen as a metaphor of what the body is trying to communicate to the person, and it hasn't been able to communicate. I mean, it's been communicating if the person hasn't picked it up yet. So we've gone down the road from, just that, feelings of, something isn't quite right, or something's off, or I'm feeling irritated, or I'm angry, to down the road, like, okay, now there's something really going on with me as far as illness. Um, and even in, for example, in traditional Chinese medicine, we see there's the organ and emotion uh, coordinates. Um, or in psychoneuroimmunology, we know that the mind, the emotions, and the nervous system are in constant communication, as well as all this new information about crosstalk, right, between all the organs of the body, and particularly the gut, which is really leading the way as far as the immune system, right, to talk to every other part of the body. So we have an enormously intelligent physiology. So again, like the metaphors are about what is your body wanting to get you to see, perhaps at an emotional, spiritual level, that you're not seeing. And so I'll just give you some examples. So for example, and by the way, these would all be unique to each person, right? We can't just put a label and say, oh, well, heart disease is this or cancer is this. It really is unique to the person. So this is just a hypothetical example. So heart disease, issues of the emotional heart, or was there some kind of heartbreak, or deep loss experience that the person is going through or has just recently gone through? So having to do with the heart. Um, Stomach issues. Is there something that the person can't stomach, perhaps, like an event that occurred that you just can't stomach it, or events that occurred that you can't digest? So these are the metaphors that are possible. Um, or, for example, neck pain, right? That's sort of a simple one. What is a pain in the neck, right? What is really a pain in the neck? And see, that gets to self-honesty, right? Someone has to be 100% self-honest to diagnose, so to speak, their own emotional issues that are contributing to something going on in the body. A sore throat, right? It could be, okay, what am I not saying that I really want to say, or I need to say, or I need to speak up about something, and it's hurting me? What's going on? So there's all kinds of metaphors that are possible with different illnesses. Um, Even like, well, any of them, fibromyalgia, right? Right, widespread pain and tenderness. Okay, what's going on that's so painful in life? or chronic fatigue, what is exhausting us? But again, that 100% honesty, self-honesty must be there. Otherwise, the person is just sabotaging their self and the illness is likely to continue. And sometimes that 100% self-honesty is so scary to people because it signals a major change in life. I mean, a major drastic change. And sometimes people cannot, they don't want to go there. They can't face that kind of drastic change
Yeah.
without help and support. I should say it that way, without some help and support. But maybe they don't even know where to get that. In other words, it's a conundrum for them. Yeah.
I had a client that said at the start of the series of sessions she was going to be in that she didn't think she could handle the way that her family and friends would react if she changed.
Wow. Mhm.
Now that's a big hold back because now you're holding in your one spot so you can keep all those people happy at the sacrifice to yourself. Um,
Yes.
and likely as you're transitioning into different things and making those changes, probably family and friends are going, well, it's about time. You know, they saw it for a long time and they've been waiting, you
Mhm.
know, so think
Mhm.
about how you kind of hold that back. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Now that brings our ginger back around again because ginger being the opportunity for letting go so you can heal. So as um,
Yes.
as you're choosing what kind of beverage you want to sip on, to know that if you're connecting with ginger, ginger has this opportunity to gift you that space of being able to release so that you're not going to hold on so tight to the idea, I don't want to change because everybody around me won't be able to handle it if I do.
Oh, yes. Yes. And there is a saying in our large field of healing that our biography becomes our biology.
Mm. Wow, that's very powerful.
And it is, and it's something for people to really think about, that your biography becomes your biology.
Yep. And what is the story you
And
want to
it's
tell? Yeah.
right. And it may, thinking that way from that perspective may help people to identify, okay, what's going on in my life in on the emotional, spiritual level that is contributing here to some sort of illness or disease. And how can I uh, come to terms with that? How can I heal that?
I'm just getting a picture in my mind right now as, you know, you've got a whole bunch of different stalls that people can stand under with banners. And you've got I'm the abandoned one, so I'm going to go stand over here under the abandoned piece. But then you've got all these people who have been skydiving and hiking and doing all these daredevil kinds of things. And you're looking across thinking, gee, wouldn't it be cool to be one of those people? And then standing underneath the banner and thinking, no, I have to hold on to where I am at the moment, and I can't cross over to there. But
Uh,
I was just remembering about I had these little students. They were 4, and there was 3 of them, and they came in the door to dance class, and they stood at the door for the entire session. And they did that for an entire full series. So it was like 9 weeks. And the mom would push them in the door and they would stand at the door and hold hands and be the support for each other. And then one day the mom came in, she said, this is the last day. I'm not going to send them again. If they are not dancing by the end of today's class, I'm done with dancing. So I said, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And one of the little girls decided she was going to come join in whatever activity we were doing. And the other 2 stood there horrified. And they looked at each other and they stood there. And this little thing came in to do whatever we were doing. And she was smiling and she started giggling and she was interacting with the other girls. And pretty soon the other one left as well. and left one standing there. And she had her head down and she fidgeted and she looked around and she couldn't stand it anymore. She dove in. And that was the end. Those girls at age 4 continued all the way through. And as teenagers, they danced right into their 20s. It was so amazing. But there was this catalyst that if mom had given up, they never would have found that joy. But the second part was what happened when they left. And then what did that mean? And then who came along? So that fear of, my family and friends aren't going to be there to support me if I change that much. Well, they might grow and learn and find some new things with you that they never would have experienced. And then what is your story? What is your biography? Pretty cool biography that you can rewrite. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good story. Yeah, about those 3 little girls.
Yeah.
It's a good metaphor.
Well, it was so profound that it took me that many weeks to be able to convince them because I was pretty good at convincing, but they had such a force field around them because there was 3 of them. They could dominate. Oh, all right. Let's turn towards transformation because now if we look at people taking that spiritual role, really looking at what they're doing, making the changes that they want to make, and you talked about the self-honesty and the spiritual healing, how could people who want to make that transition piece move from the doorway into the dance class? How could they invite change at that soul level? What's a few things that they could participate in or think about?
Well, just to elaborate just a little bit more on the idea of the self-honesty, because that is really key, because we can only complete the relationship or our relationship to the truth, to our inner truth. And so this idea of self-honesty is to really become your real authentic self, to let go of the people pleasing, let go of the fears, and to retrieve those parts of ourself that we've either abandoned or discarded or lost in some way, and bring those back into who we are. In other words, listen to those parts of ourselves that we have perhaps like silenced over the years. So that's a really important piece because this idea of self-honesty leads to uh, a greater harmony, a greater balance within or between our outer life and our inner life. And if we're not 100% self-honest, then really we are sabotaging ourselves. In other words, we're pretending. In other words, we're not getting to the real truths. So the honesty really helps to create deep shifts in beliefs about ourself, our life, and how we want to live, like as you're talking about just recently, how we want to live in a full aliveness as an authentic self. So how can we use this kind of self-transformation, right, um, to lead to physical, emotional, and spiritual healing? Like, how can we transform from, at that soul level? And when we're aligned with our authentic self, we we are able to excavate, to discover the emotional, spiritual issues that are blocking, impeding, stopping us from moving ahead or from healing. And as when we are in the process of self-transformation, we're 100% self-honest. we can then discover those emotions and those spiritual issues and set on a path to heal them. At the same time, we know that emotions and, well, anything having to, what do I want to say? Discordant energies that come from emotions or spiritual issues impact cellular consciousness. And so by identifying and excavating these discordant energies from our cellular consciousness, that allows our cells to rise up again to a more of a homeostasis or a balance. And so in that way, self-transformation can actually lead to a greater sense of physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being and aliveness, right down to that cellular level. And so it's likely that when our inner and outer being is more aligned, our inner self to our outer self, then our physiology is more likely to follow. And I'm saying likely, right? It's more likely to follow, so that deep healing of the self is really very restorative to the entire being, to the body, not only and the mind and the spirit. And again, the word likely, because we don't have the tools to measure healing emotions or healing spiritual issues within the physiology. And there may be other factors that are beyond that are contributing to illness. So that's really how self-transformation aligned with 100% self-honesty can really, or likely improves the body, mind, and spirit as one.
I'm thinking about when you've got that monkey mind, you have that repetitive thought that stays in there. I think it could be the same too with the woundology, that same story that keeps playing out. If you're finding that balance across body, mind, and spirit, that monkey mind is disappearing, that story is no longer there, then to be able to think about what is the story you want to tell? What is the exchange you want to have with people? In what way do you want to make a contribution, or do you want to be interested or submerge yourself into something? And I think sometimes there's stories so big behind who we are that we've kept for so long, it's really hard to even know what that might look like. But I'm just suggesting to people as they're listening and you're recognizing all these bits and pieces, where do you want to go? What do you want to be doing? And if you have the same exchange with your family members all the time and you don't like it, what would it look like if it was different? How might small changes get you towards that goal? Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. It's like if we haven't, well, I hate to say wait till the ailment arrives, right? Before you go looking for the pieces. But wouldn't it be lovely if our month was set up where we had these different aspects of ourselves that we made sure we spent time or scheduled in to be able to sit with the spiritual aspects and take some time with it. Look at the emotions that are showing up for the month or the season, and then looking at what the physical structure is doing and how it's participating, and then creating a new plan for the next month. Rather than waiting till the ailment shows up, it becomes so big, it's like front and center screaming at you, and then you have to go do the searching.
Yes.
But it always takes that before we change our schedule.
Yes, and that's something we talked about in the first podcast, the idea of really paying attention to the biofield, to the subtle energies, and taking the time and space to really connect with your biofield. I mean, really understand it, really know what affects it, and to identify when it is affected, and to be living from uh, the neck down, right in that heart space, which is the feeling space, instead of always intellectualizing everything. And, you talked about the monkey mind, like running around here, there, and, having such a busy life that one doesn't have time for self-reflection. But that self-reflection is really, really critical to our well-being.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about those people that might write in a journal. Maybe
Mhm.
they do their three gratitudes at the end of the day. And what would happen if they shift from that being a to-do list thing? As, oh, I've got to come up with my three things that I'm grateful for. It's
Mhm.
valuable, but how much
Mhm.
deeper would it be if you sat back and went, okay, how did my day go? And in what place did I get derailed? And in what place could I have really stopped to look at spiritually what was happening for me and how I
Mhm.
responded on more of an emotional level, or I just ran out of energy and so I grabbed that cup of coffee and the muffin and the chocolate bar and the to try to placate
Right,
myself to get to the end.
right.
Okay, let me go
Yes.
back and look at that whole piece. Now, what am I grateful for?
Mhm.
And I can be grateful for that opportunity to reflect. Um, and then
Yes.
bring about the well being, not just because you put those good things on a to do list, but because you really want to know more. You really want to be more involved.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We've been talking across three podcasts. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to bring up?
Oh, we have talked about a lot of different areas of mind body healing, and of course, we've just touched the surface of it really in some ways. And I sense that one of the more significant pieces that it would be helpful for viewers is again to really begin to know their biofield, really, really start to take a look and self-reflect and be self-aware of what's going on within their physiology, within their mind emotions, and their spiritual life, so that they can, well, gain awareness and identify when something is amiss more rapidly than they may be doing right now.
And I'm thinking, you and I talked about where do we go from here? Because you do teach courses in this. You teach very in-depth university level courses. You also
Mhm.
teach webinars, workshops, and smaller, dabbling into these bits and pieces. And so I'm going to invite people to think about if they were going to make a change in the way that they're approaching their health and wellness and how they build their bioenergetic wellness daily,
Mhm.
to keep in mind if they were wanting to dive into the soul aspect of things, they wanted to look at the biofield and understand it better, to start to look for some of the tools and tips that we'll be sharing out, and bringing the opportunities for us to have more discussions in this way. And instead of, we say self-care, but self-care still, in a way to me seems kind of like the band-aid, and it still seems like it's like still trying to fix the physical structure. So self-care to me, the definition of it is not quite broad enough. But coming back into the biofield and being a biofield aware, it just has so much more meaning. Um, so I just invite the listeners to think about what steps might you want to take and reach out. If you've been listening to the trilogy, leave some comments for us and send us an email and interact with us in a way that we would be able to bring forward tips and tools, but also perhaps a way to deliver material that's going to change this paradigm around health and wellness and get us out of the fixing place into the real living and diving deep space. Does that seem kind of what you would say?
Yes, yes, that sounds great.
It's always interesting. As we didn't know where this trilogy was going to go and how we could do the
Mhm.
diving. And there's so many aspects of ourself that I think we kind of search past. It's almost like I was thinking the other night, we have such incredible sunsets here on Cape Breton Island. And I can't always get down to the sunset by the water. So I get the sunset, but it goes behind the mountain. And once it's done that, that's kind of
Mm.
it for me. And I'll see some colors come up, but not what's going to be down at the water. And the other night I was thinking I should jump in the car now and go down and see the sunset. But the other part of me was like, yes, but I'm involved in doing a few things. And it's going to look like it did the other night. It's going to be brilliant and beautiful, but I already have that memory in my mind. But I think if we run our life in that same idea, then that's when we take the goldenness out of it because we had that experience and it was good. So we're going to stick in the more mundane kind of stuff instead of saying, yeah, let's drop everything and let's go experience it again. And then
Mhm.
in that time, how much reflection time do I have? How
Mhm.
much time do I have to say, I really am grateful for that sunset. I'm grateful for this 20 minutes to stop and go, how did my day go? And ask the questions the right way instead of,
Mhm.
I'll zip down, I'll see the sunset, I'll take my picture, and then I'll zip home again, you know, because there is that too. Um,
Right.
yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you did not participate in episode 1 and episode 2, please go back and listen and then consider how you might be able to make some changes in your life that's going to bring about this spiritual awareness and this spiritual opportunity and bring about some of these concepts that Delphine has brought forward for us and also brought your years of experience and education that you've offered to people. The wealth of knowledge that you've been able to share out, it's amazing, Delphine. So thank you so much for what you have been doing and for where you're taking us next.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's really been a pleasure to be on the podcast with you and your audience.
Until next time, make sure you choose that tea, know your intention of where you want to go, take the time to cultivate that while you prepare it, and then sip on that tea slowly and start to look at the spiritual aspects of your life and how you can be looking at things differently or how you can start to make the changes to where you really want to be. When you're listening to your whole being and you start to understand that biofield, and I understand a bit of my biofield, but I really do want to dive in deeper and get to know it more. So as you're thinking about that, think about the ways that you can start to bring those kind of conversations in. And then remember, you are your own healer. Ask the right questions, participate in your life in a way that is meaningful and holds that health and wellness for you. Be well, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Delphine. I'm going to have one more sip of Golden
Yep.
Serenity, and I appreciate
Thank
everything
you.
you brought.
Thank you.
All right. For those people too that are listening, uh, and we're coming into the fall of 2025, we are in the Chi integration program going to do a deep dive into the biofield and look at the layers and start to explore them. And if that's something that interests you, you can go to the website for thegreenwellcenter.com and be happy to have you join us on that. And I know Delphine's going to be in more conversations. We've got a lot more to discuss. Thanks so much, everyone. Be well.